Elijah Robinson is no longer Syracuse's defensive coordinator. Well, kinda.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fran Brown is making more changes to his coaching staff. Let's break it down. Hello, everyone. I'm Jackson Holzer. This is Locked On Syracuse, and thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. And of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's mini podcast, we are going to go over Elijah Robinson and how he is no longer the defensive coordinator of Syracuse and break it all down on this mini show. Why it's a smart move, what Fran Brown is doing with Elijah Robinson, and coming up later on, what is next for this team. All that and more here on this mini edition of Locked On Syracuse. Elijah Robinson is no longer Syracuse's defensive coordinator. Kind of. See, Elijah Robinson still holds the title of co-defensive coordinator, but he has very clearly been demoted by Fran Brown, and that's why I'm unofficially saying he's out as the DC. And we'll get to it in just a moment. This is a fair compromise between what I was saying, which is completely let go of Elijah Robinson, and what I honestly thought Fran Brown was going to do, which is keep Elijah Robinson as the defensive coordinator. Let's get to the nitty-gritty. What exactly is happening here? So instead of being the defensive coordinator, Elijah Robinson is now the co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. But this is the key. Elijah Robinson is no longer going to be in charge of calling plays for this Syracuse defense. That to me tells me that he is no longer really the defensive coordinator. They're just giving him the label of the co-defensive coordinator. Fran Brown said, quote, "The results this season were not reflective of the high standards I have for our program. After carefully evaluating our entire organization, I made the difficult decision to seek new leadership for some units of our football team. These are the changes needed for our goals of competing for championships at Syracuse." As I said earlier, this is a fair compromise. Myself and many of you have the opinion that Fran Brown should have completely let go of Elijah Robinson, given that his defenses over his 2 years here at Syracuse have not been good at all. 2025, I understand that they did not necessarily have a ton of talent. They were still awful, but the talent wasn't necessarily there like it was in 2024, which is why 2024 is even more egregious, because that defense was well below average, and they had 5 NFL players at least on that defense, plus Deuce Chestnut, plus Devin Grant, plus Murad Watson, and it was still a below average defense. Oh, by the way, Syracuse's offense led the ACC in time of possession in 2024, so the defense wasn't even on the field all that much relative to the rest of college football, and yet it still was not a very good defense under the leadership of Elijah Robinson. So the fact that Elijah Robinson is no longer the defensive play caller, that tells me, again, he's not actually the defensive coordinator. Sure, they can put the label of co-defensive coordinator for him. It's not him. And he can coach the defensive line. Cool, it's a position coach. This is ultimately a smart move because it now allows Elijah Robinson to more focus on his greatest attribute, which is his ability to recruit. When he was at Texas A&M, he led Texas A&M to the #1 overall recruiting class in the country. I believe it was in 2021 or 2022. And ever since he has come to Syracuse, he has been a very good recruiter. Now he can focus more on that. And we'll go over it in just a moment, but Syracuse can now hire an actual defensive coordinator someone who is going to call the plays. And because they're calling the plays, you would like to think that they're also going to build out the scheme as well. This is a win-win. This is ultimately a fair compromise. Yes, Elijah Robinson is still on the staff. I know I said repeatedly that I would like him gone. I actually did mention a few times that an idea I had was to fire him via promotion, which is you give him some other job title, which can be disguised as a promotion, but in reality, he's getting fired from the defensive coordinator. What Fran Brown decided to do instead is fire him via demotion. So he's saying, you're not calling plays, probably not going to build the scheme. You will coach the defensive line, but we'll keep the label as the co-defensive coordinator. Sound fair enough to everyone? To me, I've been very critical. I think that this is a fair compromise. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think that this is a fair compromise? Keeping Elijah Robinson on staff, but no longer really the defensive coordinator of Syracuse. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. Coming up, what is next for Syracuse football? Find out next on Locked On Syracuse. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. Honestly, it's the kind of gift that brings people together, and you don't need to guess anyone's size. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale, and for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. And what you see is what you are going to pay on the Game Time app. The prices include the fees up front, which I love. There are no surprise last-second fees at the checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse. Elijah Robinson, no longer the defensive coordinator of Syracuse football. What is next for this program? Well, for starters, they now need a new defensive coordinator. In addition, because we learned yesterday that Fran Brown fired Ricky Brumfield, the special teams coordinator, the Orange are going to be replacing two of the big three coordinators on any football staff, whatever the level it is. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator are the big three jobs on a coaching staff, right below, obviously, the head coach. So Syracuse is in the market for both. Defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator. As far as defensive coordinator is concerned, I am very open-minded about it, given that Syracuse's defense the past couple of years has been pretty awful. So I'll just throw out some names. I don't necessarily know how realistic they are, but they're names that jump out to me. DJ Durkin, who was the interim head coach over at Auburn. If Auburn, for some reason, can't retain him, I think that would maybe be a good idea for Syracuse to possibly pursue him. Will Muschamp over at Georgia. Again, I don't know how realistic it is, but obviously Fran Brown and Will Muschamp have a relationship, given both of them were at Georgia at the very same time. So perhaps Fran Brown can use that relationship and that connection and maybe bring him over to come to Syracuse, maybe give him a little bit more money. I don't necessarily know how realistic it is. I'm just spitballing possible ideas for the defensive coordinator. But the bottom line is I'm very open-minded, given that Syracuse's defense the last couple of years, as we all know, has not been very good. More staff changes, I don't envision that happening unless the coaches currently on Syracuse's staff decide to leave on their own power. I don't think Fran Brown in the coming days, and I could be wrong about this, is going to make any more changes. I don't think that we're going to learn tomorrow that Jeff Nixon is no longer the offensive coordinator. I think the only way he's no longer the offensive coordinator is if Jeff Nixon decides to leave on his own power. And that's the same with any other coach on Syracuse's staff right now. So they're looking for some more position coaches. And like I said, 2 of the big 3 coordinator spots, defensive coordinator and special teams. Signing day. It's actually tomorrow. The early signing period begins tomorrow. All signs point to it being a very successful signing day for Syracuse. I know that they did lose a recruit earlier today, Stephen Pickard, but he was a lower rated offensive lineman in the class. So I'm not going to freak out about that one. It's not necessarily a huge deal. Now watch, he is going to become, an All-American, and we're going to be sitting here saying, I cannot believe that he flipped from Syracuse the day before signing day. But you get the picture. At least right now, he wasn't someone who was very high up in Syracuse's 2026 class. The guy to keep an eye on for Syracuse's 2026 class is 4-star quarterback Peyton Falzone. Because Peyton Falzone, who is a Pennsylvania quarterback that Syracuse has been targeting for a long time, well, late last night, he decommitted from Auburn. Now, naturally, given that he was originally committed to Penn State at one point, and he obviously has a relationship with James Franklin, you would think that Peyton Falzone is a lock to now go to Virginia Tech because that's where James Franklin is. And James Franklin, by the way, is already making waves and headlines at Virginia Tech with recruiting. However, Virginia Tech has just brought in another 4-star quarterback in the class of 2026. Will they double dip? I'm not exactly sure. Is the door open possibly for Syracuse to flip Peyton Falzone tomorrow? So stay tuned for that. And obviously, you got the transfer portal. We talked about it yesterday. It opens up in early January. We still got a long ways away until the portal officially opens. But between now and the transfer portal opening in early January, players are going to announce their intentions to enter the portal. It's going to happen. It's already happening. So be on the lookout for Syracuse players. Yes, there are going to be Syracuse players that will leave in the transfer portal. Who knows what the significance is going to be, but players are going to leave. Players leave every other school in the country. We covered earlier today, Daniel Harris over at Georgia. Yes, it even happens to the big time programs as well. Well, players will leave. So stay tuned for that, but Syracuse can't actually add anyone in the portal until the portal officially opens. So those are some things to keep an eye on as far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. Tonight, there is a pretty big basketball game inside the Dome at 7 p.m. Eastern. Syracuse taking on Tennessee. It is the Orange's last chance at securing a quality out-of-conference victory before they get to conference play. Now, yes, they still have more games out of conference, but their competition, quite frankly, can't really help them coming up. It can only hurt them. So this is their final opportunity to get a big-time win. And we talked about it yesterday. Is this it for Adrian Autry? I doubt it, but who knows? Just something to keep an eye on for tonight. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again after the game.